Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. I'm Ben Littlemore and today I'm delighted to be joined by Transfermarkt Content Manager in Portugal, Gonçalo Tristao Santos. And Gonçalo joins us today because we are talking about Hugo Viana, who is set to be the new Director of Football at Manchester City this summer in 2025, replacing Txiki Begiristain, who leaves the role after 12 years with Man City. Don't forget, guys, if you haven't already or you're a new viewer, subscribe to the Transfermarkt channel below. So Gonçalo, Hugo comes in. He's been at Sporting Lisbon in this role as Director of Football for 6 years, I think now, since 2018. And it's been a hugely successful time for Sporting Lisbon. They've won the title twice, and previously they hadn't won it since 2002. I think when he was actually part of the squad, I believe, playing alongside Cristiano Ronaldo around that time, which is crazy. He's obviously done a great job in this role. How would you, you've obviously followed Sporting closely over in Portugal. How would you assess the job he's done? And can you tell us a little bit more about what he's sort of been responsible for in this role?
Hi, Ben. So, yeah, as you said, Hugo Viana joined Sporting in 2018 alongside the president, Frederico Varandas, and to take the role of sporting director at the club. At the time, he had little experience in this kind of position. I think that he only spent a few months in a similar role at Belenenses, another Portuguese club. And in his early days at Sporting, those days were somewhat complicated. I mean, the club was in a difficult situation, not only financially, but also in terms of the sporting performance itself. And in his first seasons, Hugo Viana ended up signing players who turned out to be, how can I put this, major failures, such as Vieto, Jeze. I don't know if you remember Rafael Camacho from Liverpool, a young Portuguese player at the time. Even Yannick Bolasie, who also played in the Premier League for several years, Rossier, Sporar. So at that time, Sporting signed a lot of players that just didn't work at the club. And I think that those were rough times, the first years of Hugo Viana at Sporting. However, I think that everything changed, especially with the arrival of the new coach, or at the time, Rúben Amorim. I think that they started to working together on the player signings, and they started to bring players who proved to be crucial. And as you said, Sporting didn't win the title, the Portuguese title, in 19 years, and now they won it twice in 4 years. And I think that was in part because of Hugo Viana's role at the club, because they initially focused on signing players from other Portuguese clubs. I'm talking about players like Pedro Gonçalves, Nuno Santos, Paulinho, even Ugarte, who is now at Man United, the English winger Marcos Edwards. So this was the first position of the club in the Transfermarkt with Hugo Viana and Rúben Amorim at the same time. But then they started to investing in players from other countries. Like more recently, I think everybody knows Viktor Gyökeres, especially. He joined Sporting last season. Morten Hjulmand as well. And it was also with Hugo Viana that Sporting bought players like Pedro Porro, who is now at Tottenham. He was at Man City at the time. Even Francisco Trincão, from a former Barcelona player. So, yeah, I think that Hugo Viana had this very important role, especially working alongside Amorim to bring these very important and very good players to the club.
That's very interesting. Very interesting as well what you were saying about at the start, maybe it wasn't quite working and it needed time. Also,
Yeah.
Yannick Bolasie is a name for the streets. You know, I used
It
to absolutely
is.
love him. Yeah, he's a
I
classic,
think
Premier
he's a
League
very
classic.
good player. He just didn't work at Sporting.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, the club was living a difficult time
Mm.
in 2018, 2019, before the arrival of Amorim. Those were difficult times for the club. So it was more difficult for the new players to have a positive impact at the club.
But obviously, like you said, since then, the transfer records had a much higher hit rate. And like you say, the one that everyone thinks about instantly is Gyökeres coming in from Coventry and just scoring an obscene amount of goals. Do you know how heavily involved Hugo Viana was in that transfer? Like, do you know if his role in bringing Gyökeres over to Liga Portugal?
Yeah, I mean, according to reports from the media at the time, last summer, not last summer, but to the summer of 2023, he traveled several times to England to try to convince the Coventry board to accept the bid for Gyökeres. It was a very difficult and a long process to brought him, but I think that Hugo Viana was crucial. I think he had a key role on the signing of Viktor Gyökeres, but Amorim also had that role, that very important role, because once again, according to the media reports, Sporting had several names that they were considering to buy for the position of center forward, but both Amorim and Hugo Viana always said that they only wanted Viktor Gyökeres, and that's why the club did a very big investment in terms of money, financially, of course, to buy him. I mean, he's the most expensive signing in the history of the club. And also, let me say that if you look at Sporting's top 10 most expensive signings in history, 9 of them were with Hugo Viana. I mean, it's true that the market has evolved in recent years, and he's already in the job, or he has been in the job already for 6 years, yes, since 2018. But I mean, the club has been able to adapt to these changes, to these challenges that the market brings, and to stay competitive and even to become stronger and to win titles with them.
Okay. I guess that's also partly because obviously the market's become so inflated and a lot of clubs are spending more money. Just looking at the statistics, one of our colleagues, Stefan, wrote up a quick article looking at the squad value increase since Hugo Viana came into the club, and it's plus 282 million euros since he arrived at Sporting, which I think is the 8th most in the world, and six of the 7 teams above them, I think, are Premier League, and the other one is Real Madrid. So that kind of shows what
from the Premier League and Real Madrid. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's good company to be in, right? So, so that proves that he's made a big impact. Yeah, I just think, and it's really interesting what you're saying about him going over to Coventry. I can't imagine in the past Sporting Lisbon had a lot of scouts going to watch Coventry play. I wonder if that partly became from obviously he played in England. Hugo Viana, I was reading up, he was actually. Yeah, and at that point, he was the most expensive teenager in British football history, going over from Sporting Lisbon to Newcastle for 9 million euros. It didn't quite work out. I think he scored 2 goals in 39 Premier League games over there. But I think injuries niggled his career throughout, and perhaps that's why maybe he's moved in to this role now, where he's gone upstairs and he understands football quite well, because maybe that's something he had in mind for a while. I just want to bring you on to another part of this discussion now. So obviously we know Hugo Viana is coming in to Manchester City next season. Pep Guardiola at the moment, his contract runs out at the end of this season. We don't know exactly what he's going to do yet. There's rumours he's going to decide about his future in the next few weeks. But there's a strong chance that Guardiola will leave the club after being there for 9 years. If that's the case, do you think now with Hugo Viana going in, the current Sporting boss, Rúben Amorim, is going to be one of the first names on the list for potential candidates to succeed Pep Guardiola?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I thought when I saw the news of Hugo Viana going to Man City, it was like someday the media will link Rúben Amorim to City, because, I mean, Guardiola is in his last year of contract. Hugo Viana and Amorim know each other very well. They like to work together. And so, I mean, I think that is an obvious link you can do now that Hugo Viana will go to Man City, but we would have to see if Rúben Amorim is already ready to be part of such a big club as Man City. I think that City is probably the biggest club in the world right now, or at least top 3 of the biggest clubs in the world right now. He's always a candidate to win the Champions League, and I don't know, maybe the club would rather like to have a more experienced coach, but yeah, I think that Hugo Viana will certainly try to sign Amorim to City in the case of Guardiola don't renew his contract, because I think that the top priority for City will always be Guardiola because of the work he has been doing the last seasons. But I mean, I think it was yesterday, or 2 days ago, that he said in an interview that he's already feeling tired. It remembered me of Jurgen Klopp some months ago before leaving Liverpool. So I think that Guardiola didn't make a decision already, didn't make a decision about his future. But if he decides to leave the club, I think that Amorim will be at least one of the 3 or 4 options for the club to sign as a new coach.
Yeah, you can definitely imagine Hugo Viana having
Yeah.
the CV of Amorim ready to go to that board meeting if Guardiola
Yeah.
does move on. Gonçalo, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for your insight. We learned a lot more about Hugo Viana and what we can expect from him going into this Man City role, and also what the future might hold for Man City and what could be a bit of a tumultuous summer for the club. Manchester City fans, let us know what you think in the comments below. Are you excited for this change? Are you worried to see, the director of football moving on and potentially even the manager in Pep Guardiola after so much dominance? Don't forget to like and subscribe. And Gonçalo, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.